I would not go around and say I have a bad stent in me, because we do not believe that that is the case.
Wellmont Health System called it revolutionary, a breakthrough technology only offered in a limited number of places across the country, including right here in the Tri-Cities region. But News Channel 11 discovered the maker of that device has now stopped sales. Good evening, I'm Sarah Diamond.
I'm Josh Smith. Of the year since Wellmont's CVA Heart Institute became a national leader in offering the new device to open clogged arteries, the Food and Drug Administration has investigated concerns about what they're calling an increased rate of major adverse cardiac events. Despite all that, Wellmont's medical director told Nate Morabito there are no safety concerns for any of the more than 100 patients in our area who received the stent.
During clinical trials for the absorbed stent, Wellmont called itself one of the top enrollers of patients in the country. The stent opens arteries, but unlike traditional ones made out of mesh wire, this one slowly disappears as arteries become strong enough to stay open on their own. Today, Wellmont's clinical research medical director told us he's not aware of any adverse cardiac events like cardiac deaths, heart attacks, or the need for additional procedures here, because Wellmont doctors followed the proper instructions when implanting the medical device and didn't use the stent on small arteries.
We're very proud to be a part of that.
July 5th, 2016. A big day for the future heart health of our region. As the FDA announced its approval of the absorbed stent, the Wellmont CVA Heart Institute announced its participation in the breakthrough technology.
It does the work up front when we need it, but goes away later when we don't need it, restoring it to the normal artery.
Just 8 months later, we've since learned the FDA sent this letter to healthcare providers, telling them the agency was investigating an increased rate of major adverse cardiac events and an increased rate of developing blood clots compared to the alternative metallic stent. In its letter, the FDA urged healthcare providers to follow the manufacturer's instructions for the use of the product. Later that month, in light of concerns, the company that makes the stent limited its use in Europe, and last month stopped selling the dissolving implant altogether due to low commercial sales.
This is not a buzz for alarm. Okay, so you don't have a bad stent or a stent that is on recall.
Dr. Chris Metzger is the Heart Institute's clinical research medical director.
Honestly, it's a good stent, provided you put it in correctly.
While he acknowledges the absorbed stent is not as good as its metallic counterpart, he says when implanted properly, it works.
It was not as good as the best stent in the world in terms of a small increase in a number of increased heart attacks or the stent clotting off.
He told us Wellmont only implanted the device on a limited number of patients, most during clinical trials.
I honestly do not remember the last one that we've implanted.
And of those who received the stent, he says they've reported no major adverse cardiac events.
I do not believe that they are any increased concern. The risk is minimal compared to the best stent in the world.
Late today, Wellmont said it recently sent the absorbed stent back to the manufacturer. An FDA spokesperson told us the agency is continuing to monitor the number of adverse events, saying overall, while the absorbed stent is responsible for increased rates of adverse events compared to its counterpart, those rates remain relatively low and likely can be lowered more by following the instructions and not using it on small arteries.
And Abbott, the company that makes the stent, told us today when implemented in appropriately sized vessels and when instructions are followed, the results are comparable to the leading metallic stent. Abbott said it intends to continue working on a next generation absorbing stent and added when the FDA approved this stent, some doctors were using an outdated technique and needed some comprehensive training.